39 points at 52.37. That's almost 11%. The pound buys $1.26 and €1.13. LBC weather staying windy across the UK this evening with further scattered showers, wind and rain easing for most overnight, low of freezing. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Serena Farrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8 on LBC. Now, in this hour, you can watch us as well as listen to us. You can do so via the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, Facebook page, Twitter feed, YouTube channel, wherever. And the reason is because we have Keir Starmer with us. He is one of the 3 finalists. Sounds like X Factor, doesn't it? Does it feel like that now? Sort of, you're heading towards the grand final.
Well, we seem to have been at this for weeks on end, and we've been. The 3 of us have been going across the country popped up on stages, asked lots of questions. And we're now at that stage of the competition where I think I could give the answer for Lisa or Rebecca and them for me to any question.
I remembered I chaired, I think, 10 of the Tory hustings with Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt, and they could literally recite each other's speeches by
so we're at that stage. Now, and if it all goes horribly wrong, I'll just stay on a train eating sandwiches and be found years later.
Right, let's tell you what we're going to do. For the first 20 minutes or so, I'm going to ask the questions. Then it is over to you at home. The number to call if you'd like to ask Keir Starmer a question, 0345 6060 973. We have to start with coronavirus because it's been very interesting, I think, that there has been quite a sort of cross-party agreement on this so far. Is there anything that you would, if you were Prime Minister now, is there anything material that you would have done differently?
Well, it's really concerning. I mean, you can feel the anxiety across the country. I think that the government is following advice, and that's a good thing. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important for us as the opposition, as the Labour Party, not to engage in party politics. I think there are searching questions that we have to put, but I think at the moment people expect us to act with the government where necessary to support the government in some of these measures. They appear to be following the advice. They need to keep being open about that. I suppose it's not so much what I would do differently. I think the next challenge is going to be that the advice at the moment is very much the health advice, as you'd expect, but this is inevitably going to go into other departments, into prisons, into the police, into other areas of life. And the question really is the government truly prepared for that next bit, which is the joined-up bit between all of the departments?
But do you not worry, though, that the advice that our government is getting from the medical and scientific professionals is clearly rather different from that other governments are getting? And you look at what's happening in Denmark, in France, in Spain, and they are introducing now quite draconian measures, and yet our government seems reluctant to do that.
Yes, I do think the government's following the advice, and I say that having listened carefully to what's being said and having listened to medical experts, and that's the right thing to do. It is obvious that other countries are going further. In France and Ireland in the last day or two have gone much further than we have. We are slightly behind in terms of the timetable on this, so that may be a taster of what's to come. But I think so long as the government follows the medical advice, then I think they're in the right place. I do think we need to ask them, and we should ask them, difficult and searching questions about this. I think that's very important. But we should support them as long as they're following that advice. But I can see there might come a tipping point where the public say, well, should you have gone a bit further? And if this suddenly escalates, that will be a strong criticism.
And of course, you have got people like Rory Stewart. Now, obviously, he's fighting to be Mayor of London, so he's got to keep in the headlines. But he is really critical of what Boris Johnson's been doing. Nigel Farage, we hear every night on this station, being very critical as well. And so there are voices out there that think that the government haven't been doing the right thing.
No, I think that's right. But the health experts that I've spoken to have said in answers to me, which I think are true that the government is at the moment following their advice. Now, this is fast moving. Things are going to change. You can, even during the course of the last 24 hours, you can feel that this is moving into a different zone. And therefore, I think over the next few days, we are going to see some further measures.
And do you think the local elections and the mayoral elections should be postponed?
I think it's inevitable. I'm afraid, now that the Electoral Commission has said that they ought to be postponed, I think it is inevitable.
It's odd that they've made that letter public, don't you think?
Well, maybe, but I can see that if you think of all the preparation that needs to go into it, the sorts of meetings and contact you need for a general election, all the candidates, all the teams meeting up, going to people's doors. So I just feel it's inevitable that is going to happen.
The budget, believe it or not, was only yesterday. It seems a long time ago. I suspect you kind of agree with the measures that they introduced on coronavirus. So let's look at some of the other, unless there is something that you really didn't agree with on that. But let's look at some of the other measures. I said this was the budget that Ed Balls would have given in 2015. Do you feel that it was a bit of a Labour budget?
Well, I don't actually, because the priorities were very different. A Labour budget would have really tackled social care, would have been much more focused on the climate emergency, and this budget wasn't. I think what we're seeing today in the budget is the realisation that austerity is not over. The day-to-day money going into our public services isn't going to change very much into most of our public services. All the measures were really long-term investment measures, big numbers, but not much detail. So it wasn't really a Labour budget in that sense, because what we've been saying is you've got to put your money into day-to-day public services, and that isn't really changing.
So you would have spent a lot more. I mean, I was talking to John McDonnell yesterday, and he said he would have spent a hell of a lot more. Given the flack that he got for the Labour spending promises in the manifesto, I mean, is that where you're heading? Because I think people find your position a bit equivocal in that you've defended a lot of what happened under Jeremy Corbyn, but clearly you're going to be a new broom, and people want to know, well, how different a broom are you going to be? Yeah,
well, I'm very focused on the fact that the next general election is probably going to be 2024, subject to what happens in the intervening period. But I think in all likelihood it's going to be 2024. And I'm conscious of the fact that the job of the incoming leader of the Labour Party is to develop that policy programme ready for 2024 and a programme that faces the late 2020s and the 2030s. But it's got to be future looking.
Sure, but on that basis, shouldn't you have said at some point during this leadership contest, we are scrapping our entire manifesto, this is year zero, we're starting from scratch. Now, it may be that a lot of the policies reappear, but we're starting from scratch again.
No, I don't agree with that. What I've said is that we shouldn't trash the last Labour government. There's been a bit too much of that recently. But we shouldn't trash the last 5 years either. What John McDonnell and Jeremy...
It was a complete failure.
Well, what Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell brought to the Labour Party and to opposition in those years was greater clarity that we were anti-austerity, that we were against cuts to public services, and that we thought that the climate emergency was such that it ought to be hardwired into all of our economic thinking. Now, that is right, and I've seen this because I've obviously worked outside Parliament before I came into this. I've seen organisation after organisation go through something that's gone wrong, here losing an election, but there are other examples, and then scrap everything and say, well, everything that we did must have been wrong. And I think that's the wrong approach.
Well, you don't scrap your core principles and beliefs, but in terms of policies, and this is where I don't think, from what I've seen, any of the three of you kind of really get this, particularly maybe Rebecca Long-Bailey, who seems to think that that the policies were incredibly popular. And I remember the day after the election doing debates with people, Grace Blakeley being one, saying, oh no, the policies were incredibly popular. Well, they can't have been, because you lost by a huge amount.
Well, I think we lost for a variety of reasons. I get your point on policies. I actually think the manifesto was overloaded. There was just so much in it that the question whether the policies were good and bad almost didn't come up, because in my experience, I went out to 44 constituencies with the campaign teams. The reaction of people, particularly on the doorsteps, was, you're not going to be able to deliver it. I don't believe you. And therefore, it didn't even get to the point of a debate about the particular policies. It was massively overloaded. And there's a big lesson for us there, because we go with an overloaded manifesto, brimmed with policies to the point that nobody actually believes we're going to deliver it. Boris Johnson goes with 3 words, get Brexit done. And one of the things I've been saying very clearly in this leadership race is we have got to get this communications issue much better sorted, because the clarity of message just wasn't there.
No, and that's partly because people like you were sidelined in the campaign. We didn't see you at all in the campaign on the media, or I don't remember doing. Emily Thornberry, who I think is a very effective media performer, wasn't seen at all. It was left to 2 or 3 people.
It was.
And, you must have been furious about that.
Well, I would have liked to have got out and made the argument.
Translation, you were furious.
I would have liked to have got out and made the argument. But I do think that we, the Labour Party, need to be honest about the reasons we lost that election. In all the teams I was with, of course, there was lots of discussion about what it was. 4 things just kept coming up. Number 1 was the leadership of the Labour Party. Fairly or unfairly, that was the number 1. And anybody who was campaigning knows very well.
That can't have been a surprise to you.
No, but it came up. The second one was, of course, the Brexit position that we adopted, although that came up differently depending on where you were. If you're in the northeast, it came up in a particular way. If you're in Scotland, it came up in a different way. The overload of the manifesto, as I've put it, and I'm afraid and sad to say, anti-Semitism came up. They were the main features. And I think it was cumulatively the public lost trust in the Labour Party as a force for good and a force for change. And that's the most important thing that we've got to rebuild over the next few years.
Now, we're told by some that it was just Brexit that lost the Labour Party the election. I don't know whether you think that was the main thing.
I just don't agree with that. Partly because none of the campaign teams that I was with were saying that. And they were giving the variety of reasons that I've set out. And secondly, and again, we, the Labour Party, have got to have a bit of honesty about this. We have lost 4 elections in a row. And therefore, there's something deeper going on. And if we take away from this election that the only thing that stopped us soaring to victory was Brexit, I think that we're heading for another defeat, because I don't think that's a proper analysis of what went wrong.
Some people might say, well, you would say that because you were the architect of the Brexit policy. Or were you? I've always been fascinated by this as to whether that policy was forced on you or whether you thought it up yourself.
Well, let me try and get the balance of this right, because I don't want to absolve myself from any responsibility. I held the brief. I do take responsibility for our position, but it was a collective position. It was agreed at our party conference. It was signed up to by the shadow cabinet, so it was a collective position. But I would gently say this, that
were you its instigator?
Well, the conference policy was not the one I was actually arguing for. I don't want to reopen that, because I took the view that once conference had decided, that was right. But just bear with me on this, because there were only so many positions you could take on Brexit as the Labour Party. The only other 2 positions were to say, we want a deal which includes a customs union and single market, a very close economic relationship, in which case you and others would no doubt have challenged me and the Labour Party, say, well, that's effectively the same as Remain, and if we'd lost you, to say, well, that's the reason. Or we could have said, well, we'll support Boris Johnson's disastrous Brexit deal, which, 1, would have been disastrous, and 2, you and others would have said, well, you didn't put up any opposition, no wonder you lost. So sometimes people suggest there was this within easy reach position that we could have taken. But I think it is important that it's important for me to say this. The Leave Remain argument is now over. We have left, and I think it's very important for our party that we say. That's very important for me to say that, having advocated Remain.
And on that, would you guarantee now that you will not go into the 2024 election campaigning to rejoin?
Yeah, I don't think there's any case for rejoin. That's not a campaign that I'll be putting forward.
We have to go to a break, but I just want to finish off this section by reading you this email from Martin Owers. He says, here in County Durham, I know a man who's canvassed for Labour in every general election since the 80s. Last December, he had to stop knocking on doors after one day because of the the anger and abuse he faced on doorsteps over Brexit and Labour's support for a second referendum. How can the main architect of Labour's disastrous second referendum policy hope to win back the Red Wall while supporting rejoining the EU and failing to back the opportunities of Brexit?
Well, as I say, I'm not campaigning to rejoin the EU. That's not any part of my programme going forward. But I would, that's a good challenge. And I have, over the last few years, spent a lot of time in areas that voted to leave because I genuinely thought it was important. In my constituency, Hobenham and Pancras in Camden, we voted 75% to remain, and I voted and advocated remain. So I knew that the challenge for me was to go to areas that voted heavily for leave and have difficult conversations. And that's what I've been doing for the best part of 3 years. And they're tricky and they're robust. But once we get past that, there are clear messages about the need for more infrastructure, for better jobs, for decisions to be...
The Tories are stealing your clothes on all of that, though, aren't they?
Well, we'll see about that. There's lots of promises, and we'll see whether they deliver.
Tony Blair's great success was to plant his tanks on Tory lawns, and that's exactly what Boris Johnson is learning from here, isn't he? He's doing the same to you in those constituencies.
Well, let's see. I accept that people have trusted Johnson and the Conservatives with their vote, and our job is to get that trust back. I'm not going to underestimate the difficulty.
How can you, as the architect of the policy that they were voting against, do that? Surely you are the least likely candidate to achieve that.
That's not been my experience. I've been canvassing, I've been knocking on doors myself in those constituencies. I've had those conversations. And once we get past the gritty conversation, we get into the other things that really matter to people. And I think that on that, there's a lot of common ground. But I mean, in answer to your challenge, it was very important to me in this leadership race to show that I could get the support of our members of Parliament and our local councillors in those very areas. In other words, the people representing people on the ground in heavily leave areas are supporting me in this campaign. And that was very important to me to be able to demonstrate that.
Right, we'll have some more questions from me in a moment, and then we'll be taking your calls. It's 19 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Want an easier way to run your business and take payments? You want Square. Whatever your business, sync it all together seamlessly with Square's integrated point-of-sale software, hardware and e-commerce tools to make sure everything's square at the end of the month. With no long-term contracts, no wonder millions of businesses around the globe have gone Square. Visit square.com/UK to learn more and go Square. Authorised by the Financial Conduct Authority for the provision of payment services.
Have you got the pass? You know, the National Art Pass, the 54 Masterpieces Before Tea Pass, the Got In for Free Pass, the Making the Most of the Weekend Pass and the Best Lunch Hour Ever Pass. It's the Expressionism Explored Pass, the Fashion Museum and Horniman Pass and the Hayward Gallery and Chatsworth Pass. It's the That Was a Good Idea Pass and the See It For Yourself Pass. Free entry to 240 museums, galleries and historic places, as well as 50% off major exhibitions. It's the National Art Pass. See more for less.
The thing I would say to anybody that was thinking about a job in social care is go for it. I'm Georgia. I love social care because you never know what each day will bring. It's emotional sometimes, highs and lows, but no 2 days are the same. I love the work, yeah. It makes me feel really good as a person. We make people smile every day.
If you want to make a difference to your life, care for someone else's, visit everydaysdifferent.com to find jobs in adult social care.
Proper supporters. You can't beat them. But just imagine if your business had the same kind of support as your team. The government is helping businesses all over the country with support for financing, support for innovation, support for exporting, and support for leadership training. And we're not talking part-time supporters either. Move your business up a league. Go to businesssupport.gov.uk.
From home offices to shared workspaces, however you work, at Starling Bank, we'll help you to keep your business flying. With easy integrations that connect your banking with your accounting software, your business is ready for takeoff. Starling Bank, helping business fly.
The 1413 LNER train, Coach C, taking aunties with cold hands to nephews with warm cheeks in Edinburgh. Remorseful revellers back to their beds in Leeds. Business mums gliding over the Forth Bridge towards adoring toddlers in Newcastle. And a band heading to London to wow a group of strangers in a tiny pub. This is us. These are our journeys. This is our LNER.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
23 minutes past 8. I'm with a man who could in 25 days be announced as the new leader of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer is here. You can watch us on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, the Facebook page, Twitter feed and YouTube channel. Keir, are you a socialist?
I am a socialist.
Because that word went out of fashion quite a long time. Because you give this appearance or impression of being a bit Blairite.
What gives you that impression?
Well,
it's really interesting.
The way you come across, I don't mean that as an insult, by the way. I know it is an insult in the modern day Labour Party, but you've kind of got that, I think, that kind of character, and I don't see you as what I would normally describe as a down-the-line socialist. But in this election campaign, you have been a bit lefty, haven't you?
Well, I'm really interested in this question because people say, well, you're a Blairite. And then I say, well, why? And they say, well, you look like one. Not what you're saying. And it's kind of totally ridiculous. But the other thing, perhaps more seriously, is as each of us are trying to be the next Labour leader, everybody wants to badge us as a past Labour leader. Are you Tony Blair? Are you really Jeremy Corbyn? Are you Ed Miliband? And my answer is I'm not any of those people. And I suppose there is a serious point here, which is if the Labour Party is to get from where it is now to where it needs to be to go back into power, which is a huge, huge task, then whoever's leading the party and the team around him or her have to own the next 4 years or so and actually hammer it out ourselves. And of course we can reach to past leaders to see what they did well, but the idea that you can sort of rebadge and be a past leader is for the birds, whether you like Tony Blair or you didn't. He started his project for the Labour Party as leadership project in 1994. That's 26 years ago.
Have you talked to him throughout this campaign?
I haven't, no.
So I think that's quite interesting, because I would have thought that he ought to be somebody that would quite like to see somebody like you elected leader, but the fact that you haven't talked to him, I think, is actually quite significant. What about Gordon Brown?
I've talked to Gordon, yes.
Okay.
But I genuinely think that the next stage is for the next leader. I have said, and I mean it, that we shouldn't trash the last Labour government. There were lots of good things done by that government. Children lifted out of poverty, Sure Start, which I think, for 0 to 5-year-olds was incredible. The Good Friday Agreement, the bits that I didn't agree with, the Iraq War and other bits. But I think that we should be proud of our past Labour governments and hold up their achievements as an example of what Labour can achieve when it's in power.
Well, of course, to get into government, you've got to eject the current incumbent. How will you take on Boris Johnson? What do you think of Boris Johnson?
I've only been an MP for 5 years, if you can believe it. Somebody's shoved about 50 years of history into that 5 years. So I've had David Cameron, Theresa May and Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson's by far the worst.
In what way?
I don't think that he's got any moral compass or principles that bind him. When I dealt with Theresa May, I obviously didn't agree with her on a lot of things, but I felt that she had a framework that she was operating within. There were places she wouldn't go. I don't feel that with Boris Johnson.
But do you not feel he's somebody you can do business with, whereas she was somebody who would shut up shop in a meeting, be very socially awkward in a meeting?
Completely the opposite. Everybody who's had any contact with Boris Johnson says, don't take a word he says at face value. Make sure you've got a lawyer with you, and if he's offering any money for anything, put it in the bank first before you take. I mean, honestly, anybody who's been up close to him says he's completely untrustworthy. Whereas actually with Theresa May...
He's very effective, though.
No, but just on this... I mean, on Theresa May, as I say, I didn't agree with her on lots of things. She was Home Secretary when I was Director of Public Prosecutions, and we had a good working relationship. And she never did anything behind my back. And when we were in the cross-party talks, they were done very professionally, and each side was putting forward the case they wanted to make in good faith. I wouldn't have that with Boris Johnson, I don't think. I think he's a man who needs to be confronted. He doesn't like being confronted. He doesn't like the detail.
He likes to be liked.
Well, he likes to be liked, and there is the danger. He's actually a very dangerous man. He wants you to think he's a likeable man, and he didn't...
But he is actually likeable. I mean, I've never been his greatest fan, but he is likeable.
That Andrew Neil interview that he wouldn't do told you much more than the fact he just didn't do an interview. He doesn't want to be confronted.
I think it told you that his advisors told him not to do the interview.
If you look at him, he's so uncomfortable when he's being confronted.
How will you take him on at the dispatch box?
Confront him. Absolutely head on in a very serious way.
Is that your natural style, though, confrontation? I always think of you as more of a consensual person. Can you do confrontation in the way that you would need to at PMQs?
I've been doing that sort of confrontation in courts when I was a lawyer for years and years and years. That's what cases are all about. Absolutely taking on the other side and destroying their argument.
But do you not feel that maybe you are underestimating him in the way that Ken Livingstone underestimated him? Because Ken never thought that he could lose to Boris, and he did twice. That he's been constantly underestimated throughout his time in politics. No one thought that he could get the EU to reopen the withdrawal agreement. No one thought he'd really get a majority of 80. It's a consistent line of Labour politicians underestimating him.
I don't underestimate him. I was saying how I would deal with him, but I don't underestimate him, and I think it's a mistake to underestimate him, to think that he's some pretty harmless guy. He's actually really dangerous. I don't underestimate him in the slightest. That's why I would confront him, because I don't underestimate him.
Would you confront him in a personal way? Because Jeremy Corbyn hasn't done that, but there are lots of ways that you could confront Boris Johnson. You mentioned moral compass earlier on. Is that where you're going to go?
No, I don't think that's the right way to confront him, and I don't think that's what the public want to see. I don't think it actually... We all think it really matters what he does in his private life. I honestly don't think the public are that concerned about...
They've factored it in, haven't they?
I think it's priced in, and I think if someone was to just concentrate on that would be a big mistake. I think you need to take him on his arguments and on the detail of what he's actually saying.
Right, final question from me before we go to our callers. This actually isn't from me, it's from somebody who emailed it in earlier. If you could travel back in time to meet your namesake, Keir Hardie, what would you ask him? And you were named after him.
I was named after him. What would I ask him? I'd probably ask him we
should explain for people who don't know who Keir Hardie is. He was the
founder of the Labour Party 120 years ago, and I suppose I'd ask him if he ever thought that what he was founding would 120 years later still be in existence, 580,000 members and several Labour prime ministers down the line. I'd be intrigued to ask him which of the Labour prime ministers that we've had he most admired. And I suppose I'd also probably ask him whether he'd vote for me in the leadership election in the next 3 weeks.
Somebody mischievously said today that, of course, it could have been a Keir who founded the Labour Party and a Keir who presides over its demise.
That won't happen. We're going to rebuild trust in our party, and my intention is to take us from where we are now back into power.
Right, over to you in a moment. Let's just get the latest news headlines on LBC. It's 8:31. Here's Serena Farrow.
The UK's moved on to the next stage of its response to the coronavirus outbreak as the government accepted it can't be contained any longer. The Prime Minister's called it the worst public health crisis for a generation. It means from tomorrow, anyone with a new cough or temperature is being asked to stay at home for at least 7 days. Boris Johnson says that's likely to go further in the next few weeks.
If someone in a household has those symptoms, we will be asking everyone in that household to stay at home. We're not introducing this measure yet, but I want to signal now that this is coming down the track.
The aim is to slow down the spread of the illness and reduce numbers infected at the peak. 10 people in the UK have now died and there are at least 590 confirmed cases. And also the FTSE 100 suffered its biggest one-day fall today since 1987 amid fears on the markets. LBC weather staying windy across the UK tonight with further scattered showers, wind and rain easing for most overnight with a low of freezing.
LBC.
We need to leave now. Monty, where's your other shoe?
Some things in life are hard to find quickly. Your new boiler doesn't have to be one of them. With Swell Heating's online tool, find the perfect boiler from top manufacturers like Worcester Bosch in under 5 minutes. Visit swellheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
Ah, so I think that's the sound of a yodeler who's just bought a used car online from Kazoo. It's passed a thorough 150-point inspection, the car, not the yodeler, and comes with a full 90-day warranty. Yeah, that's what it was. Alpine Fresh. Can you buy a used car online with confidence as standard? Kazoo, yeah you can. Kazoo, the new way to buy a used car.
This is the sound of confidence being made in the British Army. Did you get that? Here, past the rain. Past the shouting. To that. Right there. The sound of a soldier unclipping from their first mountain abseil, now ready to overcome any obstacle. The sound of confidence that lasts a lifetime being made. Find where you belong. Search Army Jobs.
Formula One is back on Sky Sports. Watch it live to feel it all.
It's lights out and away we go. He's going wheel to wheel. Oh, that's going to be contact. Extraordinary racing.
To watch every race live, search Sky Sports F1 for your latest offer and upgrade today. 31 days notice to cancel. Requires Sky Entertainment. See sky.com for full terms.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's 8:34, time for Keir Starmer to take your calls. Let's go to Anne, who's in Rochester. Hello, Anne.
Hiya, Ian. Hello, Keir.
Hi, Anne.
I'm on the left, watched all the hustings that I can find, possibly, and I think Lisa Nandy has made it really clear what Labour did wrong, and she wasn't in leadership when the election happened.
Yeah.
I'm very worried about members who are on the left, and particularly Richard Bergen. I wouldn't go near him with a barge pole. I'm terrified of him. What are you going to do to deal with Labour members who are really, really on the left?
Well, what I've been saying, Anne, and you'll have seen this at the hustings, is that we need to unite as a party. We need to pull together. And one of the things I think we've got wrong in the last few years is that we've spent too much time taking lumps out of each other, asking ourselves which part of the party you're from rather than what you're saying. So what I want to do is to get people to come together in our party. And I've tried to model that actually in my campaign team by having people from different parts of the party. I do know this is difficult, but I just feel that unless we do it, we're heading for another disaster. So I want to us to unite, to be a very effective opposition and to be able to win that next general election. Obviously, this is a test in a way because we're in the competition. The members can hear what I'm saying, and I'm saying let's stop fighting, let's be united. If those members vote me in, they know the basis on which I'm going to operate because that is what I want to do. So in a sense, if I succeed, I think and I hope that proves that our members do want to stop the fighting and come together. I have to say, I don't know what your experience at the hustings was, Anne, but I've been quite struck by the fact that most people at the hustings, most people at our members, haven't been divisive. They've actually been genuinely hopeful, if you like, wanting to turn a corner. And actually, we've had a couple of times that they've given a standing ovation to all three candidates as a sort of sign of hope for the future. I don't know whether you pick that up.
A bit group huggy.
Well, no. But listen, when the Labour Party's been fighting as hard as it has over the last few years, actually to see a few weeks of coming together is very positive.
You know the old saying about you can't make an omelette without cracking a few eggs. You're going to have to do that as soon as you get the job, aren't you? Because you're never more powerful than in the first 6 months, and you've got to lay down the gauntlet. And so presumably, I mean, Seamus Milne, for example, you're not going to keep him on as Director of Communications, are you? Jenny Formby, you don't want her to be General Secretary of the Labour Party?
Look, you know and I know that I'm not going to start answering questions like that.
I was hoping you might, but I kind of thought you wouldn't.
What I've said to the members has been clear and consistent, which is we need to genuinely pull together as a party, and that does mean that all parts of the party have got to. We've got to get to a mindset where we want to win the next general election.
What about momentum? Because I gather they've caused quite a lot of trouble in your own constituency, Labour Party.
Well, momentum is a very strong force within the Labour Party. I've been out campaigning with members of Momentum. There are lots of different people in Momentum. The young people are full of energy, and I don't think purging bits of the Labour Party is the way forward.
Didn't they try to purge you?
No, they didn't. No, and I've got members of Momentum supporting me in my campaign, and I'm very pleased that they are. But what I want is people to have the values of the Labour Party and follow the rules of the Labour Party. Where they don't, on issues such as anti-Semitism, then they should be out of the Labour Party.
Funny you should mention that, because we've got a couple. In fact, we've got quite a few, but we'll just do one. Anne, thank you very much. Sam is in Islington. Fire away, Sam.
Hi, Keir.
Hi, Sam.
I'm Jewish and left of centre, and like many people I know, I was too appalled by the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party to be able to vote for Labour in the last election. I heard Lisa Nandy speak quite passionately recently about what she would do to tackle anti-Semitism in the party if she were elected leader. How come you're not as tough on anti-Semitism as her?
I am. And I've been very tough on it for a number of years, speaking out in the shadow cabinet and speaking out in public. I think this is a real test of leadership, Sam, and I think that the leader of the Labour Party has to take personal responsibility for this and has to be very, very clear. If you're anti-Semitic, you should be out of the Labour Party. And I would make that message very, very clear as leader of our party. I would also, because I've run a big organisation and therefore I know how these things work, if the leader of the organisation says on the disciplinary cases, I want to see a report every week on my desk, then it's likely to shift a lot more quickly than the speed at which we're going at the moment.
Sam, why do you think that Keir hasn't been as strong as Lisa Nandy on this?
Well, I think that what Lisa Nandy said was quite unequivocal. And, I mean, to be honest, it was the tone of the way she spoke. She was clearly very, very passionately disappointed about the failings of the Labour leadership to deal with the scandal and how she thought that affected Labour in the last election. And to be honest, I don't really think that any of the other candidates have matched her in terms of the detail of what she would do and the way that she clearly felt about it.
So, Sam, I don't think that. I mean, I think, in fairness, on things like an independent panel to decide these cases, on the way we'd rebuild trust with the Jewish community, we have said those things, and I think that's really good for the future of our party. What I would say, I mean, I think you were from Islington. I'm obviously in Holborn St Pancras in Camden. As the MP in that area, I've regularly met leaders of the Jewish community, and I think and I hope if you asked them, they would say Keir stood with us and we were always able to rely on him and get hold of him whenever we needed to do so. And that's how I would lead the Labour Party.
Thank you very much, Sam. Graham in Bushy has emailed to say, what's the greater embarrassment for Labour, not dealing with anti-Semitism properly or suspending Trevor Phillips, one of this country's leading equalities campaigners?
Well, they're two different cases, but I think that there's no doubt that our failure adequately to deal with anti-Semitism over the last few years has been a real stain on the party, and we have got to deal with it. And there is, I don't want any of our members or activists ever to have to knock on a door again, as they did in this election, and be met by the response that in this House we've always voted Labour, but we're not going to do it because of anti-Semitism. And that's not just because we want the votes, that is a values issue.
You can't think it's right, though, for Trevor Phillips, a lifetime campaigner against racism, to be suspended in this way.
Well,
and don't give me a wishy-washy answer about, you can't comment because it's an ongoing case.
Well, it's not a wishy-washy answer, actually. It's a very important answer, because the criticism of the leader of the Labour Party is you keep dipping your oar in and making your view known. And the problem with that, and this is not a problem with the Labour Party, it's any organisation, if the person at the top of the organisation dips their oar in and makes their view known...
But that was the problem. Jeremy Corbyn didn't dip his oar in. He took no action at all, or no meaningful action.
Just hear me out. I think we need an independent panel to decide these cases. We have a panel at the moment, and they will have to decide this case. And it probably won't be decided in the next 3 weeks, it seems to me. It's likely to be decided under the leadership of whoever comes next. If the leader of the party says, I think this, then the staff who would... Now, hear me out. The staff who are charged with doing it can be... This is the argument against doing it. It's the same in the police or any criminal justice system. If the person leading the organisation says, I think that, before the process ended... that can have an influence on the outcome, and that's part of the problem.
I get that, but in this particular case, I presume you've known Trevor Phillips for years. I think he's a member of your local party.
Well, he was also the head of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission.
Exactly. You've known him for years. You can't think that it was right to suspend him so urgently as Jenny Formby did, given the things that he said were like years and years ago. It's just preposterous.
I'm not going to get drawn into this. I genuinely think that this needs to go through the process properly, fairly quickly. And I suspect it's one of those cases which will eventually have to be dealt with by whoever's next leader of the Labour Party, and therefore it would be prudent for all three of us to let the process complete without expressing views at this stage.
Or expressing any leadership. Because that's what you if you want to be leader, you've got to lead. And surely this is one thing where you can say, look, I know Trevor Phillips. I know that he is not a racist and he should never have been suspended.
Ian, you're completely wrong. As the Director of Public Prosecutions, I led an organisation, a national organisation.
That's different.
No, hear me out. For 5 years, if you ask a team to make a decision, you let them make a decision, then as the leader of the organisation, you look at that decision. What you don't do is go in before the team has completed their job and start giving your own opinion. That isn't leadership. That is not leadership.
I think political leadership is very different from leading the Crown Prosecution Service.
The impact is the same. This is a process that I think should be independent, but certainly should be taken independently. And we've asked people to go through that process. We need to let it complete.
All right. We'll take more of your calls in just a moment. It's 8:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Weekday mornings from 7. LBC.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak. In Italy, you might be aware they've closed all stores. Do you see the UK going down that path?
We are taking advice from our scientists and medical advisors. That's not what they're advising at the moment. Every time we make a decision, it will be guided by the science and the evidence. It will be a decision that is good clinically, but at the lowest possible social cost.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Simply Safe. Easy to choose, set up and use.
LBC.
London's air pollution affects everyone's health, especially children. The main cause? Road transport. By swapping just one car trip every week for walking, cycling or public transport, we can help make London's air cleaner together.
About 18 months ago, I invested in a bike. I was being really lazy and driving to work. I get to work much quicker. I've saved, I reckon, nearly £2,000 by cycling.
See how the Mayor and TfL are working towards cleaner air and how you can help too at lbc.co.uk.
It can be convincing when someone calls you pretending to be your bank, especially when they say your money is at risk and you should transfer your funds into a safe account. Well, don't be fooled. At Lloyds Bank, we will never call and ask you to move your money into another account. We believe nothing is more important than our customers' trust. And together, we can keep your money safe. Lloyds Bank, by your side.
Formula One is back on Sky Sports. Watch it live to feel it all.
It's lights out and away we go. He's going wheel to wheel. Oh, that's going to be contact.
Watch every race live. Search Sky Sports F1 for your latest offer and upgrade today. 31 days notice to cancel. Requires Sky Entertainment. See sky.com for full terms.
Vodafone 5G will have the power to change your world. From driverless cars to virtual reality and real-time gaming. That's why we're rolling out 5G across the UK. Discover Vodafone 5G on the UK's best mobile data network. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
NPerf testing awarded Vodafone Best 2019 mobile internet performance based on 35,664 tests on the NPerf app in the UK. Coverage may vary. Visit vodafone.co.uk.
Tim saved 10% on his tyres today at QuickFit, so he's thinking it's about time he did something nice for Mum.
Ah, tickets to see DJ Richie C and MC Dazza G.
I'd stick to flowers next time. Get 10% off selected tyres at quickfit.com or visit your local QuickFit and drive away happy. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
For up to 50% off a choice of floors and beds. For an extra 20% off selected ranges. For something for everyone. Carpet Right. For life. Offer ends Tuesday.
Will the retirement you get be the retirement you want? Check your state pension and see how you can build on it with a workplace or other pension. Get to know your pension at yourpension.gov.uk.
Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 8:48 on LBC. We're with Keir Starmer. He's taking your calls. Neil is in Wigan. Hello, Neil.
Oh, hello, Keir. It's
Hi,
a
Neil.
privilege to speak to you, sir. I would like to ask you a question tonight.
Yeah, of course.
As a Brexiteer, why should I vote for you having no immigration policy?
Well, because firstly, Brexit isn't going to be the issue in the next general election. We're going to be well beyond that. And what we will have to do is decide whether this government's delivered anything of value, and I don't think they will, and face the future.
Well, I don't think that the Tories are perfect, but I'm actually from the Lee constituency.
Oh, yeah.
Which has traditionally voted Labour all our lives. And
Neil, that's really interesting. You know, I came up to Lee 2 weeks after the election to see Jo Platt, who, of course, was our MP. And I sat with her and her team because I wanted to obviously go to an area where we'd lost and ask her and her team what were the issues that were coming up in the campaign there. So I was up there just, I think it was the week or two before Christmas.
Yeah. So are you going to have an immigration policy in the future? Are you just going to carry on having nothing? Because I think this means a lot to people that you manage immigration. The Tories are not brilliant at it, but at least they've got one.
Well, of course we'll have an immigration policy. You're quite right about that. The Tories have got one, and they say that they'll let people in if they're earning a certain amount of money. So, Neil, what I'd say to you is this. Tragically, whilst this leadership campaign has been on, my wife's mum died, and we were in intensive care in St Mary's in Paddington for 17 days. And in the 2 beds down was a young woman who'd been in a terrible accident and had been in there for 6 weeks. She has now been attended by people from 67 countries providing brilliant healthcare to her. The nurses there, and none of them really earn the money that Johnson would require for them to come to this country. And I really think that people who want to go down that line, I'd like them to go to that intensive care unit and say to the staff there, you're doing a brilliant job, you're in intensive care, genuinely brilliant, and breathtakingly brilliant, by the way, but since you don't earn enough, I don't think it's worth it.
Well, I don't think he's done that for the NHS, has he? That's not for the NHS.
Well, let's go to social care then.
That's just for people coming over in general. I mean, we've had a massive amount of Eastern Europeans coming over here, and nothing's been done about it.
Yeah.
Because we've had free movement of people, and you are to keep free movement of people. Oh, in the conversation with you now, do you think I'm sort of bigoted man?
No.
Like you thought that the lady from Rochdale was when Gordon Brown spoke to her and called her a bigoted woman.
No, Neil, I don't. I mean, that wasn't anything to do with.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Neil, that wasn't. No. I'm not. I did the immigration brief for the Labour Party for a year or so in 2015, 2016, and I went to many different places to have conversations about immigration. I never took anybody to be bigoted. I actually had lots of conversations, and when we got down to it, and I said to people, well, do you think people in this country should be able to go and work in Europe if there's a job that they want to do? And most people said, well, that's fair enough. And do we want people in Europe to come and work here if there's a job needs doing? Most people said that's fair enough. When I then said, do you want people to be able to, people in this country to be able to study in Europe? Most people said, that's okay. Do you want, students from other countries to come here? Most people said, that's okay. So actually, once we got into it, I don't think people are bigoted. I actually just think we should have a bit of a more open conversation about it.
Do you think that, as Prime Minister, you would like to negotiate a sort of pseudo-freedom of movement agreement with the European Union?
Well, we're going to have to negotiate an agreement that works for our country, and our economy is dependent on people come to this country. I mean, if we take social care, which is obviously hugely important, that's the care that goes in for people often at home to help them get out of bed, get dressed, food, get back into bed, cleaned, etc. We've got over 100,000 vacancies at the moment, and many people aren't getting the care that they need. So we can have, and sometimes we can have this conversation in the abstract, but when it comes to the reality of it, we do need people to move between countries to provide that.
What lies behind Neil's question, I think, is under a Keir Starmer government, would immigration be higher than under a Boris Johnson government?
Well, it depends. I mean, the biggest driver is the economy. When the economy is doing well, we tend to have more immigration because we've got more jobs for people to do. And I think this lack of honesty about what we really need isn't helping. Many people who come to this country do fantastic jobs that we need doing and contribute hugely to our country. We don't do ourselves much of a service by pretending that they're not adding anything to us.
Neil, thank you. Let's move on. We've only got about 7 minutes left. Ed is in Kirkcaldy. Hello, Ed. Gordon Brown country.
It is Gordon Brown country, yeah.
I hope you're well, and more importantly, I hope you stay well. My question here is, obviously, after the Brexit referendum, there are many people like me. I used to be a Labour Party member, but now I support the SNP because they offer, more opportunity with regards to leaving what I believe to be quite a toxic government at the moment and maintaining closer ties with the European Union. So, how's the Labour leadership after the Labour leadership elections? How are you going to claw back those Labour Party voters who feel the same way I do?
Because you can't win an election if you don't win more seats in Scotland, can you?
No, you're absolutely right. And Ed, we do need to win voters like you back. I completely get that. Our votes, certainly the national vote in Scotland, obviously collapsed in 2015, recovered a bit in 2017 and collapsed again in 2019. So we've got a job and a half to do. One of the things I said to our Scottish colleagues when I was there just a few weeks ago is if I'm leader of the Labour Party, I'll be straight back to Scotland to work with them on what we need to do to go into those elections in Scotland, as we know, in 2021. And, there's obviously the question of whether people want Scotland to be torn apart and independent from the United Kingdom. I don't. I think we're stronger if all of the country of the United Kingdom stay together. I don't want more borders. I don't want more difficulties for people and to pull apart. But we've got to make a stronger argument for that, and I think we haven't done that.
Would you support Nicola Sturgeon's call for another referendum?
No, I think we should go into the 2021 election on the basis of making the argument for the United Kingdom. And I feel that we've got stuck as a Labour Party. And it'd be interesting your view on this, Ed. I think we're sort of defending the status quo, which I don't think really anybody wants anymore, or arguing against independence. And I think we need to make a stronger case for the United Kingdom, but in the 21st century, and with Scotland having more powers in Scotland, nearer to the communities there. But we've got a big job to do in Scotland. I completely get that.
OK, Ed, thank you. Jerry is in Whitley Bay. Jerry, your question, please.
Hi, Keir.
Hi.
Ian. Right, it's quite complex. 3 things: electoral coalition, Labour Party values, and confirmation bias. Now, what you effectively have is 2 parts of an electoral coalition. You have effectively northern towns that are pro-Brexit, not in favour of unlimited immigration, and are very pro-British. You have cities which are very woke, LBGT, BAME, transgender, pro-EU, pro-Palestine, anti-war in Yemen and Syria, those two sets just do not sit at all. You cannot straddle.
Right, I need your question, Jerry, because we're near the end of the hour.
Well, that is the question, is how do you straddle two coalitions that you...
Okay.
Jerry, I don't really accept that they're divided in that way. There are, of course, differences. I understand that. But obviously, I'm a London MP. I've got a central London constituency, and there are a hell of a lot of poverty, a lot of people very, very concerned about the direction of travel in this country, just as interested in the health service, social care, education as anybody who lives elsewhere. And so I actually think that what people living in towns and living in cities have in common is much greater than the divide that you've described, which I just think is too big a generalisation.
But in the end, you've got to build that broad electoral coalition that Tony Blair built in 1997, where people felt he didn't frighten the Conservative horses, did he? Conservative voters felt quite comfortable voting for him. How can you convince them to vote for you?
You're absolutely right about that. Our job is to retain the Labour voters that we've got, to win back the Labour voters that we've lost, and then go on to the next stretch, which is to persuade those that vote for Conservatives or other parties that they can vote for the Labour Party. And we do need to build that coalition, and that's a central challenge and message that has to go into the next general election. And if we think that retaining our vote or getting back the Labour vote is going to get us over the line, we're wrong about that. We've got to go to that extra place where Tony Blair went and win those votes of people who voted for other parties.
And part of the way of doing that is to have the best team on your front bench. I'm not going to ask you to form your shadow cabinet on this programme because I know what the answer will be. Although I think you could probably answer this one. Would Jeremy Corbyn or John McDonnell be in it?
Well, I haven't spoken to Jeremy or John. In fact, I haven't spoken to anyone really about it. But I am very keen to do what I've done in this campaign, which is to model unity. I'm not. You see, you said I'm not going to ask you to name a shadow cabinet. Now you're going to go all through these names.
No, I'm not.
If we carry on like this, what matters is whether you've got a good, strong working team of powerful advocates, and I'm sure we can put that together.
I'm going to finish with this from Pauline, who's a lifelong Labour supporter. I think she means this in a nice way, but you might not think so. She says, please ask Sir Keir, does he promise to at least have an opinion on things rather than be a sitter on the fence and continuously defer to the public like his predecessor did? I'm a lifelong Labour supporter, that is until Mr Corbyn became leader. Give me a reason to vote Labour again, please. And that's what there are so many people out there looking for. They want a reason to come back to Labour. How can you convince them that you're the man for the job?
Leadership. And leading a team where we pull people together. There are different ways of leading. My style is to lead in a way that people want to join and be part of something that's going to change for the future. And that means winning trust of people. And we've got to do that. It does mean making decisions and being clear about it. I don't think it's following the public, but we genuinely need to re-engage and connect with the public and have that conversation. It doesn't mean that we just follow opinion polls, but I think the gap between the Labour Party and the communities that we want to represent is too big at the moment. We've got to close that gap. That's hard work. I have found that when I go and spend time in different places and listen to people, I learn a lot from it. It doesn't mean I come back and say that's what we must do, but I learn a huge amount from what people have to say to me. And a big bit of leadership is about listening to people.
Well, excuse me, we've been delighted to have you on the programme this evening. We have issued invitations to the other two candidates, but we have yet to fix a date. Hopefully we might do that before April the 4th. And I hope if you are elected leader that we'll see you regularly on LBC doing this type of programme.
I'll come back for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And if you've missed any of this interview, we'll be putting it on one of my various podcasts, probably the Iain Dale podcast. And also you can watch it back on YouTube at your leisure. You're listening to LBC. It's 9:01.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the Prime Minister's called the coronavirus outbreak the worst public health crisis for a generation. It says the UK's moved on to the delay stage. It means from tomorrow, anyone with a new cough or temperature is being asked to stay at home for 7